being a kid in Hollywood and all of that. So, anybody want to start out with a question?
Okay.
I spent some time with Kevin, but were you in any westerns with Audie at all?
Yeah, I did Showdown, which was originally the Iron Collar.
Right.
Can you
That's what we're showing tonight.
You're showing that tonight, after this, that's right. So it was called the Iron Collar at first. I'd already worked with Audie in 1961, I believe it was. And I'd gotten to know him, and then he would come over all the time. And he said, I got another one, a Western, I want you to be in. So I said, great, Audie, you know, I'd love to do a Western with you. Because he was really, he had a big affinity, animals and horses. It was amazing to have done a war picture with him, too. I mean, I hadn't read, as I was mentioning earlier today, I hadn't read To Hell and Back until he gave me a copy and signed it to me. And this gentleman that I had seen on this beach, which was in Catalina, I could see the difference of him change because he was very humble, very reserved. He would go to dinner with my mom and I. He'd ride on the glass bottom boat, and as I was saying earlier, I found this little baby goat, and I had an affinity to animals as Audie did. Thank you so much. And and that same goat, and I don't want to be repetitive of the story I told earlier, but this same goat, his name was Caesar, and Audie said, listen, you're going to bring him home with you. I said, but they won't let me have him on the plane, Audie. And he said, no, we'll figure that out. And the next thing I knew, he had rented a boat to take my mom and I with him back over to Long Beach instead of him going in the plane and stuff. And for about a year and a half, the goat lived at my house, would pull me a little, I had like they called them flexies, or they were like a boat that a little wagon type of thing that you lay on. And the goat would pull me around the neighborhood, which Audie got a kick out of. And then after he came in the backyard, and he said, and you could see all the shrubs, everything as high as that goat could reach was gone. There was no greenery. And then when he started getting the horns, a little over a year old, it started butting my mom around. And that was about it. Once it knocked her in the pool, she said, you got to get rid of that goat. And I was heartbroken. I said, well, Audie, what am I do with the goat? I love him. And he said, you know what, he's going to be a great friend to one of my racehorses. So I'm going to take him out to the ranch, and you can come see him whenever you want. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Audie had racehorses, which I didn't know about. And he'd say, how would you like to go to the racetrack, your mom and I, go with us? And I said, sure, let's go. And he took me, I remember the first time we went to a place called Hollywood Park. And I was sitting there, and Audie's horses and people would come up. Good luck on your horse racing today. He'd have horses in the race. And he would turn to my mom, and he took, $100 bills. And he said, and I thought he was betting on his horses. He said, no, don't tell anybody, but I think that horse is going to beat mine. I don't want, and that happened all the time. He didn't believe any of his horses would ever win. I don't know if they ever did, but he would, he was a real animal. I think his affinity was more towards horses and the cowboy in him. Oh, dogs. Well, I'll tell you one thing I heard. I wasn't there for this, but I heard after I'd gotten to know him for a while, there was a woman, I believe, that was a dog trainer, or some guy that was, and he heard that he was mistreating the animals. And Audie, that was it. Audie went after this guy. And Audie could be very tough, as we know, but he'd show me these things he got from Italy where it was like a baton that you could throw out and it would whip, and he said, I'm going to get you one. But he was, you hurt an animal, he'd be all over you. That was it. It was whether it was dogs or anything. And that episode I had heard about, and I knew Audie well enough to know that, okay, that probably happened. And if somebody would mistreat an animal in front of me, it's like a lot of us probably can deal with somebody dying on the movie screen than you ever see an animal get hurt. That's something you just don't do in movies anymore. And Audie just had a real affinity with animals. I think he related to them better than he did most human beings. And it was just, there's so many things I could tell about him. Maybe your questions will lead into them. But hopefully that answered some of it.
I have a question. You're a producer and you write it. Do you ever think of making a movie about Audie?
It's interesting. I have a script that I had just done, and someone that found out I knew Audie well, and he wanted to do something on Audie, and he reached out to me and he said, would you tell me some of the stories? I never have done that yet, but interesting today, someone brought me a book that's another side of Audie that I'm going to read this book, and it very well could happen. I mean, it's things that I can believe that really happened that Audie might have been involved in. So it's, you know, I believe that God has all put us here for a reason. And the reason for me is to try to make films that either better the people or move things forward in what we believe. And that's something I would be very open to. In fact, when I got the book, and it just enthralled me, the subject matter, as I was talking to Melissa back there about it, who gave me the book, if this book, when I read it, it could very well become a movie about Audie, and it's another side of that. And he'll be definitely, because I'm going to do an autobiography sometime. I work with so many great people that a lot of people, I mean, Buster Keaton and Ernie Kovacs and Bob Hope and Phyllis Diller and Jonathan, I got to know them, as I mentioned earlier, not as celebrities. There are people that don't want to be related to as celebrities by fans. They are really down home just like us, most of them. Now, I'm sure that's one thing I don't like about Hollywood now. I think a lot of them have their noses in the air. Guys like my dad came out to Hollywood. He rode the rails. They were both, my dad ran moonshine out of Canada when he was very young. And he met up with a guy that was on for Vagrancy. And his name was, I think you'll remember, God, my mind's going on me. The great, he was out of the, he did a film called Out of the Past. Anybody remember, see that movie at all? Oh God, tell me, oh geez, it'll come to me. I'm sorry, I'm a little wiped out from this whole thing, but it's going to come to me now, and it's because he's one of my dear people that I look up to, Robert Mitchum. So my dad came to Hollywood with Mitchum, and they actually had an apartment together. When they first came to Hollywood, they were going to both be movie stars. And they went to, my dad was at MGM, and then he came over to RKO where Mitchum was doing films, and that's when they did Out of the Past. And Kirk Douglas was in that too. And my dad, it's funny enough, later I was producing a film with Michael Douglas and his brother Joel Douglas. And I met Kirk, and I did something with Kirk, and I got to work with him, who my dad had worked with years before. And my sister ends up meeting Joel Douglas through me, and she ends up marrying him. So that's, so it's a very, in that, I think the golden era of Hollywood was an era that I long to see again. The movies they make sometimes today, there's some great things on TV, but there's some really trash out there. And I think that Hollywood has been they haven't been a beacon of hope for the world. And there's so much that you can do with films. A picture can tell 1,000 words. And things of the heart will always, movies like Shane, and they'll always make a difference in people's lives. I told a story earlier to somebody that was here, and I had done a film called Dog of Flanders, which I wrote and directed. And it took me a long time to put that deal together. I had to raise, people kidded me in Hollywood because I had to raise $100 million in print and advertisement money just to get my one film done. I had to make 4 films to do this one, but I wanted to do a spiritual film in Hollywood, and Warner Brothers ended up getting it. But it was something that was not easy to do. Hollywood does not care about spiritual films. They care about the box office. So after I did this film, and I had a producer that ran 2 studios at one time, and he was an alcoholic, and it was the wrong guy to have involved, and I wanted to focus on directing. But he got involved because of me. I had raised all the money. And I wanted to kill this guy during this whole point. I won't even mention his name because he's gone now. But when I did Dog of Flanders, I wanted to make a film that made a difference to people's hearts. And Warner Brothers, of course, they wanted, instead of going out small in the theaters at Thanksgiving and the spiritual film that's got Silent Night, it's got a Christmas festival in it, it's got snow, everything that's perfect for a Thanksgiving to a Christmas release. They wanted to go out with a big theater thing, and they threw it out at the end of August when all the kids are in school, or they're either starting school or they're water skiing or they're playing. The last thing they want to do is see snow and Silent Night. I said, you guys threw my movie away. And I was very upset about that. I fought with them. And one of the things that made it all come together was after the film came out, a woman came up to me, and she was already starting to cry when she walked up to me with this 8-year-old son. And she said, are you Kevin Brodie that made Dog of Flanders? And I said, yeah. And she said, I wanted to let you know that I'm dying of cancer, and I had no way to be able to tell my son that I'd be gone soon. She had 6 months to live. And her son was with her. And she said, I want to thank you because it instilled a way for us to be able to talk about this subject matter of death which is a film that I'm doing now that deals with, all of us are this, I mean, I have a thing on my phone of a little deer that got hit in the street, and you can see the spirit, this gray vapor leaving the body of this deer in the road. And I had Clint Walker tell me when I worked with him and did a film called Night of the Grizzly, and I did a Cheyenne with him. Clint said, you know, you're the first one that explained that because he was stabbed through the heart by a ski pole. And he saw these gray vapors leaving his body. And that's this intelligent energy that all of us are. And there's a place on the other side that we all, depending on what kind of people we've been, it doesn't just end there. It kind of dictates where we go. So going back to this whole subject matter, the woman had told me she was dying of cancer, and she did. And then I got a letter from her son that someone helped him write. And he said, you don't know the difference you made in our life. My mom's gone now, but I can deal with her death. And to know that, I mean, I was in tears, because to know that you've made something, that you've sat there in a room by yourself and written a script, and that you can go into a theater and it's affected someone's life enough to make a difference and make this world a little more positive in the way and give people hope. Nobody can pay me any money that's more important than that. I don't care about the money. I do it because I love this industry, and I don't like where it's gone. I don't like the violence that it's helped create in the streets and how they glorify violence. I believe that there's great stories that can be done, and I'm trying to make a difference and continue doing that. And I hope you get to all see this film. It's called The Return from Tomorrow, and it's a book that came out. A young man that was 20 years old that was at Camp Barkley who died for 9 minutes, and he had a death experience where the price came to it. And he took him to the dimensions beyond life, or to death, and he went from the heaven to the hell. And, you know, I wanted to make a film about this subject matter for so long. I mean, since I was like 11, 12 years old, I read a book called Life After Life that James Monroe had done. And I said, one day they're going to have the technology where I can really go and show those dimensions where it's going to make a difference. And I got a phone call probably 2 years ago that someone had a book that dealt with this subject matter. And it also turned out that beyond this death experience this young man had, because of it, he wanted to stay on the other side. He didn't want to come back. He said, the love I felt was so encompassing and so unconditional that, I mean, God is love. That's what he really is. And he said, I didn't want to go back. He was supposed to go to medical school. They let him out after he got through boot camp at Camp Barkley. He went to medical school in Virginia. But he was so lost in the other side still. He didn't do well in school. So the tutor said, you're going to go back, you got to go back, and I'm going to flunk you, and you're going to go back and have to serve. And he did. He had to go, and the story then takes him through his travels through Europe, and we've seen the Private Ryans, and we've seen what Audie's done. And funny enough, it's like Audie coming back to me to say, this is a movie I want you to help make. So the final thing that I really loved about it is in this man's journey of finding God within the people he would meet along the way. And why do you like somebody when you shake their hand and other people push you back? It's an energy, whether you've known them before or whether it's an energy that you feel. That's what draws us to people. And he started to find the Christ within other people, and that's how we started to deal with what had happened. And to the point that he went to a concentration camp he helped liberate. Now, he's only 22 years old now, and he met a man there that looked like he had just walked into this concentration camp. With all these emaciated people everywhere, there was a guy that just was a beacon of light. And he watched this man, he said, and he had to know more about him. And he went up, and this man opened up to him and said, no, I've been here actually longer than anybody else. He said, well, you look like you just walked in this place. How are you like this and everybody else is emaciated and gone? He said, well, my story is that I speak a number of 8 different languages. And the SS came, he was from Poland, he was a lawyer in Poland. And the SS came and they wanted me to work for them, and I wouldn't do that. And they slaughtered my family in front of him, his children and his wife. And he was sent to some of the hardest hardest concentration camps. But he still survived and got to this camp where this man helped liberate him. And he said, so what was the difference? And he said, because I had 2 choices to make. To either hate, like all the people in this camp do. They hate what these Germans and Nazis have done to us, or I can forgive. And if I forgive, it will be my redemption from it. And this man and this other man that had had the death experience, he said, your family's really, they're still living. I know they are because I've been to the other side. And I found that so powerful to me when I think of Christ forgiving people from the cross that crucified him. And I said, here's a man that had his family slaughtered in front of him. And he could have chosen hate, which everybody would. But he chose love and forgiveness. And that's the key that I took away from it. And I thought it was a story that needed to come to the world to show, number one, that we don't die, and number two, that there's certain things that we need to follow. And it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. They're the same principles that we've been taught by Christ and God. And so those are elements that I'm drawn to. This film was more than just a faith base. It was a film of how to live your life. And it's a very ambitious project to take on. The visual effects that I have to do to show a heaven and a hell and all of that's amazing. Then I got to do Private Ryan on top of it, and then I've got to hit these points. But the script's been finished, and we're in pre-production now. And as I said, it took place originally in Camp Barkley, and they want us to come shoot some of the film there because there's 1,000 acres that these people who had a death experience and wanted to meet the same man that I'm doing the story about. And when all of this came together, it was like God, you knew, was ordaining this bringing us all together. There's a reason you're all sitting here and I'm sitting here. There's a reason we're supposed to touch each other's life tonight. And that's what I believe. And I believe that those things are values that I'd like to bring to the screen.
Okay, you need that.
Yes.
Yeah, because you've known so many famous people and it's just their friends, and being in the business, do you get to just go to movies and enjoy them? And how do you feel about seeing like people you know up on the big screen?
You know, I do enjoy movies like that. When I first watch a movie, I don't watch it technically. I try to watch it as how does it affect me, and I'm a little more choosy on what I go to see today. I think there's a lot of great talent out there, but Hollywood keeps picking the same people, and they keep making the values that they think people want. But there was a movie I was talking at lunch today about that all the studios, after the film was done, they all turned it down. Disney got rid of it, and nobody would touch it. So a little company called Angel Studios came up and they made a film. They took a film, they released it brilliantly, and it was called Sound of Freedom. And it beat all the films that Hollywood put out.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah.
And that was a film Hollywood said, even when it's done, they didn't see that middle America or all of us want movies like that. They're going to tell us, these elites sitting with their ties in an ivory tower, they're going to tell you what you enjoy. And that's wrong. They need to get around and talk to people and find out what they're really, the conscience that they need to get. But they're not those kind of people. And they're the ones that are pulling the strings. So you got to fight that system. And it would have been easier just to fall into line and make films to make money. That's never been why I did it. I put my house up to make that Dog of Flanders film. And I almost lost it because of that. But I was determined that that movie was going to be made because years before, I had envisioned this little boy walking down this aisle of a church with his dog. And there was a novella that was written in the 1870s that I adapted and updated. It had been made in 1961, and I tried to bring a different value to it. And listen, I had to recut the film and all that because this crazy producer, but it got out there and it reached people, like I mentioned, this woman that had touched her heart, her sons. And that no one can take away from me. There's no money in the world that I would ever sell that for.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With artificial intelligence, all this special effects and everything going on, I firmly believe that one of these days I can go see a John Wayne movie.
Well, that's what they're going to try to
They're
do.
going to try to do.
And that's one of the reasons that there was a big Screen Actors Guild strike recently, about a year ago or so, that ended, and it went on so long. It's all about the AI. It's because they're going to try to take people that are dead and try to make them on the screen again. And I don't really have a real fond feeling of that. There's classics, And I just don't think that, they're gonna always look for ways to try to capitalize on people that are dead right now, and because, hey, it's money. And the greed. Funny enough, I was involved, as I mentioned, with the Douglas family, and I look back on a movie Michael did called Wall Street, and I think it's the wrong message. Greed is good. Greed is not good. Greed is why Wall Street is looking to make more money, and why you're paying more at the markets right now, and why everybody is trying to get as much as they can out of your pocketbook because they're greed. And I believe that they need to learn to talk with their hearts rather than their wallets all the time.
I'm curious, what have you enjoyed doing the most? Acting, writing, directing, producing, and why? What about that makes it your favorite?
Well, the thing about, listen, to ask me now, I would say I should have probably stayed more in acting, and that's the thing I regret, that I could have done them all. I could have stayed doing that. But as an actor, I found that I was interpreting in somebody else's work. And as a creative force, that you're writing a script and you're sitting by yourself in a room working at 3 in the morning, and that thing that you're writing on the page is going to be in a theater one day, and it's going to affect somebody in the darkened theater. It's a rewarding fact there. Should I have stayed? Listen, I see these actors, what they're being paid now, when I'm doing all the work and they're getting so much more money. I go, it isn't about the money, it's that, okay, that's the easiest route. You sit in your trailer, you walk on the set, you hit your marks and do all that. To me, that wasn't what it was about. It was about trying to create things as we're talking today. I had been an actor, I could sign autographs and things, but I can't tell you that I've gone, and I'm going to continue to make films that make a difference. And there's not enough of me out there, of other people that got to think that way. And I think if we make films that are good, and the audiences come, and they say to Hollywood, look what you don't know, as they did, nobody knew how to figure out Sound of Freedom. They were like, oh, this is a fluke, this is that. And there's going to be more Sound of Freedoms, because there's a new generation of filmmakers coming up that are saying that no, because they know there may be your sons and daughters one day that'll be a filmmaker. And they know what Middle America is, because they're bringing those values up. And that's really where it starts. I would say that, I should have done all of them, because it would be wonderful. And I am going to act again. I have a couple of films that I'm actually producing. And listen, this time they can't say whether I deserve the part or not, because I'm going to hire myself.
I want to tell you
Yes.
that Dog of Flanders was at our local 12th.
Oh, really?
This April.
Really?
Yes, and I was going to see it, but I was in a car wreck. that
Oh, I'm
week,
sorry.
And I didn't get to go see it, but it was my intention. I went by and I picked out 2 movies to
Oh, that's
see,
so
and
sweet
that
of
was
you.
one of the 2 that I was going to see.
That was so sweet of you. I'm sorry you didn't get to see it. I'm surprised they still had it on the theaters and stuff.
That's what I wanted to know. What year was it released?
Well, it was released years ago. It was 1999. I made it in 97 I started, in 98.
I know what's happened. Ooh, I'm having chills. You have explained it to me. The owners of our big theater, 12 things, because it was Easter time, they had it for that. They said,
God bless them. God bless them. Because they've reached back. I said one day this film's going to find its audience. And, it was a shame because I worked so hard to make sure if it rolled out and came out at Thanksgiving, my intention was to make a film that families could come together at Christmas time. And they can talk to each other again. Yeah, and that's when it should be, the Christmas, the Easter, Thanksgiving. It needed to be the times that did that. And that was when they threw it out at summer. But that's because they had another movie. I had put almost all the money up on that. They put a little bit at Warner's. I even put up the marketing money, over $20 million. And to put it out there, and they took my money. They were going to try to steal as much as they could. And I said, from now on, I'm going to control my distribution. Because you can make the greatest film in the world, but if it doesn't get to your audience right, no one's going to see it. Thank God you were able to find it there, and thank you for those theater, whoever owns that theater where they were at, that insightful.
I know the owners
Well,
that's what they did.
they applaud them, because it isn't because it was my film. It should be any film that makes a difference in someone's life. Because, you don't have the ability to make different kind of, you may be a film you'd love to see, but they're not giving it to you.
It was there this April.
That's amazing. That's a story I can't wait to tell my daughter. Because my daughter was in it, by the way. She played
They
Eloise.
had the full thing, full picture of the dog and all in the.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
On the outside of the building, you know, where they show what shows are shown.
Now, what theater was that in this area?
12, we have.
Oh, that's amazing. That's great that they did that. It must be a privately more independent theater chain then.
Bergans family owns it.
Okay, so because the bigger theater chains, it's a mass booking type of thing, you know, it's all volume. It's McDonald's or quality, you know, that's what they think. They'd rather be McDonald's, unfortunately. Any other questions? I'm gonna get a drink of water too. Yes?
Did you know the name of the movie that Audie wanted you to be in with him?
Well, he first came to me, I don't know if you can hear me, he first came to me about a film called Time for Dying, the last one he did.
His last movie.
Yeah. And I saw it recently. Audie's name is the producer. Audie wanted to get in behind the camera like I had done. I hadn't done it when I was with Audie, of course, but he wanted to do that. And he came to me, and then when we saw each other again, he said, unfortunately, I think I wasn't really impressed by the film at all, but Audie wanted me to do the part, the lead role in it. And it happened to me a lot. Maybe that's the way God put me where I'm at now, is to be behind the camera. There was a number of parts, whether it be Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, Jeff Bridges, who I know very well, and my dad worked with Lloyd Bridges and did the first thing about a black man in the military and the racial thing. Stanley Kramer produced it, and it was called Home of the Brave with Lloyd Bridges. It's on TV all the time. And I think that it was because a movie called Fat City, it was Jeff and I, and Jeff's about 4 years older than me. So, and Badlands with Martin Sheen, those were all films I was I was down to those guys and me. But because I was younger than them, and I just missed the age thing where I wouldn't be able to, because the boy that's supposed to be in it has a relationship with a woman, I think it's about they get married in Time for Dying. Audie had another couple he wanted to do as a producer. And when that one, he said, Kevin, you might be young for that. The director's fighting on it. But I said, Audie, whatever's right, you know, that's okay. And he went off, and unfortunately that was the last one. I'll never forget, I was on the Colorado River with friends when I got the news that plane had gone down in Roanoke, Virginia. And on May 28th, 1971, and it just devastated me. It took a long time. I mean, I went through a lot of things, like Ernie Kovacs was killed when I was making the show, the series, and I was signed for 7 years by CBS. But they couldn't replace Kovacs to work with Buster Keaton. And it was just the three of us. What I would do is, I was probably 1,000 kids that went for the role, and I was lucky enough to be the one they picked. And it was between the films I had done with Audie, I believe. And all I would do is go to school for 6 months. And there was a little place, they called it the Columbia Ranch. It's just off where Warner Brothers is now. And it had little bungalows, and it's where they did Dennis the Menace and shows like that. And Ernie and Buster, I would do my schooling, I would go and sit with them for 6 more hours, and I would learn vaudeville and burlesque from the two of them. Two geniuses. Kovacs was the genius of television, and Keaton of silent eras. And I remember so many times that what we would do each day, Keaton had one line, "So sue me." And I would do all these lines with Ernie. We'd build up to it. And when we get to the end of it, Ernie would walk down this little bungalow thing, and Kovacs was sleeping. Ernie would walk down, and Buster was sleeping on a couch. And Kovacs would kick him. And Buster would stop up and go, "So sue me." And that was that way. And I did that for 6 months. And I think I told the story, and I don't want to be redundant about Ernie's death. I was gone that weekend. I had done the last scene, a shaving scene in a window with Ernie, and he was supposed to go meet his wife, Edie Adams, at Milton Berle's house to play poker on a Friday night. It was starting to drizzle out, and we hugged. He said, "I'll see you on Monday. We got a pickup shot to do, and we've done the first episode. We got a lot more to do." And he said, "I'm buying you that report." It was called Chris Gets His Pony. And Ernie was a medicine man who sold medicine, and they slipped out in the back of the hotel, and Buster Keaton was an Indian that hung out with us. So it was just the three of us, really, and I'll never forget him hugging me that night. I went to ride horses for the weekend, and I came back on a Sunday night, and I had heard the story later that he had switched cars with Edie Adams, his wife, after the poker game because he wanted her to drive the heavier car. He had like a Rolls Royce or something he had. And she had a Corvair. He took the Corvair and she took the Rolls Royce, and that's why he lost control of the car and it hit a pole and killed him. So instead of shooting that scene on Monday with him, I was going to his memorial at Forest Lawn. And there was a lot of, I mean, death was something that came, and it was something that it wasn't, I had to figure out where these people go and what happens to us. And it's all led into this film that I'm doing now. It's funny, everything we do in life, even if it's not a good experience, it somehow has moved us along. And that's how you've got to look at the positive of the thing. As bad as something might be, and God, we've all probably had terrible tragedies in our life. I lost my dad, I had to pull the plug on him because a hospital killed him. My mom, I found dead in a swimming pool because she tripped because my Lassie dogs that I was given when I was doing the Lassie shows, Rudd Weatherwax gave me he said, you can have it. It's always been a male, so the females I can't take from the litter. I'm going to give you this one with the understanding that all the Lassies I'm going to breed back. So the next 3 or 4 generations of Lassie came from my females, to the point where I was living in Malibu. I had 17 of them on the beach. They'd go and, it was amazing, they'd go and steal the lobsters from the guys going out to catch the lobster, and they'd bring it up to my house, and I'd cook lobster up in the barbecue I came out to on the water. But a lot of those things that, it's just amazing how it touches your life, you know, and I think some of the best compliments I've ever gotten from people have been, you don't seem like you're from Hollywood. And that's a real compliment to me. I'm sorry, but it is.
What have been some of your favorite people to work with?
Oh, all the ones I'm mentioning now. Ernie, Buster, of course, Audie, probably #1. Clint Walker was a dear, dear friend when I did Night of the Grizzly, and I can tell some stories about that film too. But I mean, all of mine would be the ones that I think back that they're more the golden age of Hollywood. The people today, I just think they're too in love with themselves, you know, and it's all about them, and they seem like they're all coming out of these cookie-cutter acting schools. And I mean, it was one movie I was supposed to do, which I did end up doing, and I found an actor that I thought was going to be a major star, and he wanted to do this film for me, and he was just doing background work with me, like the background, you'll see the actors walking and doing this, no lines or anything, but he had a chemistry to him. And they would not let me use him because he had no box office tracking. He had no box office numbers yet. He had no video numbers that they knew how to protect their investment. Well, sure enough, I went to somebody over at Fox that was directing a film, Ridley Scott, and I said, you know, here's a guy, you got to look at him. And I had an office at 20th Century Fox, and and of course he ended up getting the part. It was Brad Pitt, and it was Thelma Louise. And they wouldn't let me use him. And now all of a sudden he does that movie. Oh, can you get Brad Pitt? You know? They have no foresight at all. Yeah.
You know, I knew that Audie did not want Richard Lapp for Time for Dying. I knew he was arguing with Brodie about that.
Yes.
He insisted. But I'd never known until now who it was that Audie envisioned in that part.
He wanted me to do it.
And I think about that and I think, oh my God, what a difference in that movie.
Yeah, he wanted me to do it, and I told him I would.
Made.
But I think he probably had things with the director and he didn't tell me. And he was producing it, and it was his first really producing job.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear back after that was done. I never saw the movie until literally last week. Yeah. I said, I'm going to go there, and I haven't seen Time for Dying, and I've got to go watch it. And that's what I felt had happened too.
Yeah.
And,
the book I gave you has got a little bit after that, but he actually fired Bedinger.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he embezzled a bunch of the money.
Well, I believe that. He had a guy like a dog of Flanders I had.
Exactly, you know, and that's why Audie the film didn't get finished and all that stuff fell apart, is because Bedinger embezzled a bunch of the money, and then Audie was really upset then about, you know, just everything.
Oh, it's a total, it caves everything that you work for.
Yeah.
And it was his first producing. He wanted to show you I can do more than just be the same roles that you're giving me. They were giving him the same kind of play the role. It was just a different script with a different guy character on it. So, and he wanted to show he wanted to show that he can act. And that happened to Elvis Presley too. they put him in these cookie cutters. And they have a lot, my dad did 2 films with Elvis. He did a film called Roustabout, Blue Hawaii. And my dad had a lot of great things to say about Elvis Presley. What a great human being. And here's another story. I had worked with, I told a story this morning about this psychic that I was introduced to because of somebody I was kind of a mentor to me named Jess Stern, who wrote the books on Edward Casey and that. And he wrote a book on Elvis too. Elvis would go to a place called Lake Shrine, which is, it's of all religions. The theory of that is there's one God. Why do we need so many religions to separate us all? Because there's one, you know, love your neighbor, be a good person, care about people in life. You know, all these different things are all, they're all the main things of God, you know, in Christ. So Elvis really had that side of him, and he would go there all the time. And he would buy this autobiography of a yogi, and I've written that script too that will be made down the line. But he would buy these books and give it out. And then when they get him, the colonel would get him back on the road again, and they would pop him with pills, or they would do this, he'd be sucked right back into that world again. But there was a side of him that just didn't want that at all. I mean, he started singing gospel as a kid. That was really where it came from. Any other questions?
What was your favorite female actress to work with? And, you know, like,
Oh boy.
during-
Now I was younger, so I wasn't doing the things where it was anything whether the romances.
Yeah.
right.
You know, I've never been asked that question. I really don't have one favorite. Most of them were all males, only because I think I became this father. We bonded that way. I mean, listen, Martha Heyer was wonderful in when I did Night of the Grizzly. I never had any kind of female thing when I did the films with Audie. It was always the father, the son, or that relationship there. Funny enough, I was told a couple of people earlier, as I was walking through the exhibit here, I saw those K-Rash, or those kits that they used to have in the military. And I'll never forget, I was riding this water buffalo in Battle of Bloody Beach. And I said, oh, what are those like? And he said, oh, here, you should be eating one in one of the scenes. And sure enough, I bit into that thing. It was the worst thing I've ever done. And I said, those poor son of a guns, I don't know how they got through the war.
You said you never got spam again.
Oh, they're terrible, terrible, terrible. Oh, he was. I told the story about, and he doesn't. I guess you had to have been there, but I wanted this orange juice one night, and Audie was at dinner with us in Catalina, and I was kind of mad at my mom that I couldn't have orange juice. She said, no, I want you to have a glass of milk. And I went outside, and Audie must have talked to her and say, listen, let me give it. So he would go and be my benefactor in trying to talk her into things. So I came back in, and little did I know, because it was a dark and little restaurant, that he had gotten me this orange juice. So when I took the drink, I was expecting milk. And if you expect milk, and you take a shot of orange juice, you think it's the worst milk you've ever tasted in your life, and it's sour. So it was funny, and he got such a kick out of that. I spit that out, I said, oh my God, and he's laughing like heck, you know. Yes, he was a jokester. Any questions at all?
Were you friends with his children?
It came up earlier. I knew Terry because Terry went to the same school I went to, and we were actually in the same grade. And I always had we were cordial to each other, but I didn't get to know Terry well because I was kind of, I felt bad because I knew that Audie I had heard that was going through relationship problems with his wife at the time. And he lived so close to us. And I don't know whether I had heard something or what, but I knew that was going on. And I was spending so much time with Audie, and I knew he really loved his sons. And I wondered, are they jealous of me because I'm hanging out with Audie and I'm doing movies, and we might do a movie, it's 3 months that we're together. And then believe me, it's a family that you really build there, you know. It happened on Night of the Grizzly, some wonderful actors in that one too. And that was a wonderful experience. It was Clint Walker's favorite movie he ever did, too, before he passed on. He reached out to me, I think it was his 92nd birthday, and I did a birthday thing that the Clint Walker Foundation did, and they asked me to do that, and I said it, and then Clint called me, And he was very spiritual too in the end, especially. The gray vapor I told you about with his deer that was hit, and you could see it leaving its body. Clint's the one who told me that I saw that when that ski pole went in and all of that. When we talked again, and it had been years, and he was like in his 90s, early 90s now before he passed. He was really talking to me when we talked on that phone. He called me and he said, you know, I remember that story I told you, and you had told me about that. He said, you know, I have this, I'd love you to meet this preacher. He became very spiritual in the years, and they were trying to get me to come, and I wish I had gone to Kanab, Utah, where they have a Western greeting. You know, that's a whole thing that they do. And the Clint Walker Foundation was trying to get me up there, and I wish I would have gone. I realize now that, you know, sitting here today, I feel Audie's with us, and I'm kind of a spokesman because everything that you guys have done in memory of Audie and how much you love him is, I feel, and it chokes me up to know that I'm kind of representing that man that's not here now, that I know is with us all in spirit form. Because as I mentioned, this Maria Marino, when she did that reading that guy had set up for me, she knew nothing about me, didn't know my name, other than Kevin. And I made sure of that, and because I didn't believe in any of that really. I was kind of like the guy that was writing the book on her, and it was called A Question of Immortality, the book by Jess Sterner. And she looked at me and she said, who is that man standing behind you with all those medals? He's your guardian angel. He's watching after you. I knew right away it was Audie. And in my life, I've been, because of my own quick draw thing, which I've been taught by Sammy Davis Jr., quick draw. Of course, I thought someone else was going to shoot me. Well, I put the gun in my holster, it goes off and shoots me. So, and then I was doing the Lassie show. I took off for the day with the Seminole Indians, and a gun backfired and shot me through and I was 13 years old, 14, it was right after Night of the Grizzly, and the bullet went right through me, and they gave me up for dead in the first hospital because gangrene had set in. I rode to the hospital, I said, don't tell my mom how bad it is, don't tell my mom. I could feel the blood trickling out. So all the way to the hospital, I would wipe the blood on my shirt. And by the time we got to the hospital, she hadn't seen anything yet. She just thought I'd been maybe wounded or something in my foot or whatever. I walked in, I set the gun down, I said, I think I've shot myself. And because I had tripped over these cypress knees, and the gun swung back and it had a faulty firing pin they had lent me. And I got shot there, and I was in the hospital for about 10 days in Orange, or just outside of Orlando, Florida, at the Orange Memorial. And I'll never forget that my dad, they gave me up and dead in the first hospital. And my mom reached out to my dad, who said, you get him out of that hospital, get him to this other hospital. And as they were wheeling me in, I finally passed out in the ambulance, moving me to the next hospital. And the bullet had fallen out of my back. And of course, I thought, having done movies, that when the bullet comes out, they just wrap you up and you're okay. Yes. That isn't the way it works. Yes. That bullet cuts you up inside, especially if they're a lower caliber bullet, because they will ricochet and cut you up. They won't just go straight through. And it was one of those kind of bullets. So this man that was just going off duty named Dr. Kahneman, I'll never will forget him. And my mother said, I didn't know this later on, I found out my mother got sleeping pills from him. She said, but she was going to take them all if I died. And we were that close, my mom and I. And I made it through it, thank God, because this doctor, he was going off duty, his son had been killed in the Everglades, and he went back, and it was a long surgery. And I had a funny thing happen. They had Night of the Grizzly had come out, and I was signing the autographs on these comic books. I was on the cover of one of them. And I'll never forget this. They were giving me something that would make me want water. I forget whether it was salt I was low on or something. So they said, and I was drinking, they had a tube that the minute I drank water, it would come up. So you really didn't get satiated for the drinking, but I just kept craving water. And I drank so much water that the doctor comes in and he goes, I'm not going to give you any more water. You get this sponge, and that's it. That's all the water. This much water and a sponge, because you're going to kill yourself if you need it to heal inside. Well, turn on the TV in this hospital room, and what comes on? It's Laurel and Hardy, and they're in the Mojave, they're in the Forward Legion, and they're dying of thirst. And I'm watching this, looking at this glass of water all night, going, oh my God, I can't do this. You know, you never know how God has a sense of humor too.
Oh, jeez. No.
Kevin, do you have any siblings at all?
I have two half sisters that are now gone. Their father was named Jan Sabbath, and he had a good band called Jan Sabbath and the Top Hatters. They started, and that's another kind of a tragedy. Before my mom remarried to my dad, Steve Brodie, she was married to Jan Sabbath, who was really the love of her life, and he was a genius who played violin he was like 12 years old in Russia. He was playing violin. He was actually, I found we were from Ukraine, and my sisters were from, that was their father, and of course my same mom. And he was going to play a concert. Tommy Dorsey and the Sinatras, Sinatra sang with him and all that. He was going to do, he was 38 years old, he was going up to Sacramento to do a concert or whatever. He played the big band era, in which I grew up with big bands because of my mom and the movie business. And he was going up there and he had a brain aneurysm that hit him and killed him. And the tragedy story really is that my sister her birthday was October 7th. And he died just a few days before that, and he had hidden a gift for her. So when they found out he was dead, and then a radio announcer that he had told, please put it on the radio where my present's hidden for, so after he's gone, my sister, Debbie, they're all half-sisters. One was married to Joel Douglas, Michael's brother, and then the other one, Debbie, as I mentioned, she had her own life. She worked in reservations in America and then became a supervisor and helped create the whole, the point system that they do to give away advantage miles and stuff now. So I came up through a lot of different things, but big bands were important, and I still love to listen to big bands. In fact, because I'm doing this World War II film, some of the music, like It's a Wonderful World that he wrote, I'm going to be using those in the film, because now that I'm the only one here, those royalties go, not because I want the money, it's because I have the rights to them. So I'm going to use some wonderful music of Jan's in that as a homage to him, as I'm going to say at the end of the film, for Audie, you know. So, yes. So that's pretty much it. Anybody else?
Are you going to stay and watch the movie with us?
Oh, I'll watch some of it. Yeah, I forgot.
Okay.
You got me that next.
Sure,
Yeah, okay.
yes, please
Yeah.
do.
I'll watch some of it. I've seen it so many times. I told the story where we did that, where that little town that you'll see was the back lot of Universal. And then years later, I took my daughter on one of those tour things. And so I'm going on this tour. I hadn't been on the back lot for a long time. There's the town. They've got this thing of water that rushes through it now. And this little pond that I used to fish, and Audie would sit on a little pier with me, is where they have the Jaws shark that would come out of the water.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that was the place where I would sit. We made Iron Collar that became Showdown, and I would fish right there, and Audie come spend the lunch, and he'd sit with me and watch me fish these bluegills and just hang out with me.
They mentioned Audie.
Oh, they did? I didn't know that, yeah.
They did.
Well, that's great. Yeah, well, that's where it was done. Everything's changed so much, but I remember, yeah. I really long for the great days of, well, you know, there's so many things that have changed now, and you know, things, I don't think sometimes for the best, but I've got these memories that are the closest to my heart that I hold in with all these people that I knew, and there's a way like being here today that I can bring their life to you a little more, then I'm thrilled to do it. It's an honor to me. So thank you for all coming and being here.